I am Captain Kali Barnett, 32 years old. I survived the killing fields of Afghanistan, but absolutely nothing prepared me for the war against my own parents. Here, inside the Los Angeles Superior Court, the suffocating scent of my mother Victoria's Chanel perfume is overpowering the smell of the truth. She is currently dabbing at crocodile tears with a silk handkerchief, pointing a manicured finger at my immaculate dress blues, and screaming to the jury, "She is a killing machine. She used a gun to threaten her frail grandfather and rob us of $1.6 billion." My father, Charles, stands beside her, adjusting his Italian silk tie, nodding along like a bobblehead. "The girl is insane, Your Honor. The military brainwashed her." The entire courtroom gasps, looking at me like I'm a monster, not a soldier who just lost her only family. They think I am just that abandoned little girl from years ago, that I will tremble and collapse. But they don't know that in my left breast pocket, right beneath my medals, I am holding a black box of truth that can burn their entire charade to the ground. Comment Semper Fi if you believe honor cannot be bought with dirty money. Hit subscribe right now to witness justice served in this tear-soaked courtroom. The heavy oak doors of the courtroom swung open. I stepped into the arena. My back was ramrod straight, a posture forged by years of screaming drill instructors and the weight of a rucksack. My polished dress shoes struck the hardwood floor. Clack, clack, clack. A rhythmic, authoritative sound that cut through the low murmur of the gallery. I wasn't just walking into a legal proceeding, I was entering a combat zone. Opposite me sat the Barnett Circus. My father, Charles, was draped in a navy blue Armani suit that probably cost more than a sergeant's annual salary. His hair was slicked back with enough gel to withstand a hurricane, and he was currently leaning over the railing, whispering something to a reporter from TMZ, flashing that practiced, charming grin that had faded from the silver screen a decade ago. And then there was Victoria. My mother. She was wearing a black dress, ostensibly for mourning, but the slit up the thigh was high enough to be a red carpet statement, not a funeral attire. She wore oversized sunglasses indoors, bathing in the artificial light as if it were paparazzi flashes. They turned and looked at me. There was no recognition in their eyes, no parental warmth. They didn't see a daughter. They saw a hostile combatant standing between them and a $1.6 billion payday. They looked at me the way vultures look at a carcass that hasn't quite stopped moving yet. They wanted to pick me clean. They wanted to devour the legacy my grandfather, Henry, had built with his bare hands. I took a sharp inhale through my nose, locking my emotions down behind a firewall of discipline. "Hold the line, Kaylee," I told myself. "Maintain bearing." Their lawyer, a man named Sterling, who wore a smile like a venomous snake, approached the bench to begin his opening statement. He didn't look like a man of the law. He looked like a hired gun for a soap opera. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Sterling began, his voice dripping with theatrical concern. He paced in front of me, invading my personal space just enough to be annoying, a classic intimidation tactic. "Captain Kaylee Barnett here has just returned from the hellscape of war. We all know that our brave soldiers, well, they often bring back demons in their heads." He paused for effect, letting the word demons hang in the air like a foul smell. He glanced at me, a smirk playing on his lips, challenging me to react. "Mr. Henry Barnett was old, frail, and lonely," Sterling continued, spinning his web. "How could he possibly resist the manipulation of a highly trained officer skilled in interrogation? She isolated him. She cut the phone lines. She forced a senile old man to sign a new will under duress and fear. Every lie was a precision strike designed to bypass my armor. It wasn't fear I felt. It was a profound, acidic disgust. They were weaponizing my service, my sacrifice, and the very PTSD that so many of my brothers and sisters suffer from just to secure a bank transfer. It was stolen valor in reverse, using the uniform to paint me as a villain. Then, the main event began. Victoria took the witness stand. The courtroom went silent. She dramatically removed her sunglasses, revealing eyes that had been professionally made up to look red and puffy. It was a masterclass in stagecraft. She began to sob into her handkerchief, her shoulders shaking. Yet I noticed, with the sharp eyes of a sniper, that not a single actual tear fell from her eyes. "I tried," she choked out, her voice trembling perfectly. "I tried so hard to be a mother to her. But when she came back, she was different. Every time I tried to visit, she looked at me with killer eyes. She banned me from seeing my own father. She told me if I came near the estate, she would use her military skills to handle me." I sat at the defense table, my hands resting on my knees. Underneath the table, my fists were clenched so tight that my fingernails were digging into my palms, breaking the skin. I could feel the warm trickle of blood. She never visited. Not once. Not when I deployed. Not when I came back. Not when Grandpa Henry got sick. The only time she had called me in the last 5 years was to ask if she could borrow the vintage Hermes Birkin bag Grandpa had given me for my 18th birthday because she needed it for a photo shoot. "She's a ticking time bomb," Victoria wailed, burying her face in her hands. From my vantage point, I saw something the jury didn't. While her face was buried in that handkerchief, she tilted her head slightly. She was looking at her reflection in the small compact mirror she had hidden in her palm, checking to make sure her mascara hadn't run. She was checking her makeup in the middle of testifying against her own daughter. Charles stood up next, placing a comforting hand on his wife's shoulder, looking at the jury with the solemnity of a founding father. "We only want what's best for Kaylee," he lied, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "Your Honor, $1.6 billion is a dangerous amount of resources for someone with mental instability. We are petitioning to manage the estate for her. We want to put her in a specialized facility where she can get the help she needs." A murmur of agreement rippled through the courtroom. The jury looked at them, the beautiful, grieving Hollywood couple, and then at me, the stone-faced soldier in the rigid uniform. They were buying the script. They believed the reality show narrative, Living with the Barnetts, season finale. The judge, a stern man named Marcus Nolan, looked over his spectacles at me. The silence in the room was heavy, expectant. Everyone was waiting for the crazy vet to snap. They wanted me to scream, to flip the table, to prove Sterling right. But I remembered General Mattis's words, the code I lived by. Be polite, be professional, but have a plan to kill everybody you meet. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I kept my face completely neutral, a mask of absolute discipline. My silence was louder than their screaming. It started to unsettle them. Charles loosened his tie slightly. Sterling shifted his weight. They expected a fight, chaos, drama. Instead, I gave them a wall. I wasn't agreeing with them. I was observing them. I was gathering intel. I was waiting for the perfect shot. Victoria looked up from her handkerchief, thinking the judge was distracted. For a split second, she dropped the grieving mother act. She looked directly at me and smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was a smirk of pure, triumphant malice. A smile that said, "I win, you lose, little girl." That smile. It hit me harder than a mortar round. It was the exact same smile I had seen 27 years ago. The courtroom dissolved around me, the smell of Chanel fading into the scent of burning asphalt and exhaust fumes. The present melted away, dragging me back to the day the scar on my soul was first carved. That smile. The one Victoria flashed at me in the courtroom, so full of venom and victory, tore through the fabric of time. Suddenly, I wasn't a 32-year-old Marine captain anymore. I was 5 years old again, standing small and trembling under the relentless California sun. My memory dragged me back to that fateful afternoon in Santa Barbara. The heat was oppressive, a dry, suffocating blanket typical of a Southern California summer. The air shimmered above the asphalt, smelling of ocean salt and hot tar. I stood by the curb of a sprawling driveway, clutching my tattered teddy bear. His name was Mr. Paws, and he was missing an ear, a casualty of too many tight hugs when I was scared. I was wearing my favorite pale pink dress, the one with the lace trim that scratched my neck, but I loved it because I thought it made me look like a princess. Victoria was there, hovering near the open door of a silver convertible that gleamed like a mirror. She smelled overpowering, a cloud of expensive floral perfume that made my nose itch. She was frantically applying a fresh coat of lipstick, checking her reflection in the car's side mirror. She didn't look at me. She looked through me, focusing entirely on her own image. "Kaylee, be a good girl," she said, her voice distracted and airy. "Mommy and Daddy are just going to Disneyland for a little bit. You wait right here. Someone will come get you." My eyes lit up. Disneyland? The Magic Kingdom? To a 5-year-old, that was the promised land. Hope bloomed in my chest, bright and desperate. "Can I come too, Mommy?" I asked, my voice small. "I promise I'll be good. I won't ask for anything." I reached out with a tiny hand and grasped the hem of her silk skirt, just wanting a connection, a reassurance. She recoiled as if I had burned her. She slapped my hand away, not violently, but with a cold, dismissive swat, like she was brushing off a fly. "Don't wrinkle my skirt, Kaylee," she snapped, her voice sharpening into a blade. "Stay put. You're messy." The rejection stung more than the slap. I pulled my hand back, clutching Mr. Paws tighter to my chest. Inside the car, Charles sat in the driver's seat, revving the engine impatiently. He had a bulky cell phone pressed to his ear, the old brick kind from the 90s. He was practically bouncing in his seat with excitement, his voice booming. Yes, Mr. Spielberg's office. We're on our way right now," he shouted into the phone, his face flushed with the intoxication of potential fame. "This role was born for Victoria. We won't let you down." He lowered the phone and turned to my mother, his face twisted in annoyance. "Get in the car, Victoria. We're losing daylight," he barked. "Don't let the brat ruin our big break. Just dump her at the old man's gate. He'll deal with it." Dump her. The word hung in the hot air, heavy and suffocating. He said it so casually, as if I were a bag of trash to be left on the curb for pickup, not his flesh and blood, not his daughter. I stood frozen, my heart feeling like it was being squeezed by a giant fist. They weren't going to Disneyland. They were chasing a dream, a spotlight, and I was just excess baggage. I was the luggage they needed to lose to travel light. The engine roared to life, a deep, guttural growl that vibrated in my chest. Tires screeched against the pavement as Charles slammed on the gas. Dust and gravel kicked up into a choking cloud. Panic, primal and terrifying, seized me. "Mommy, Daddy, don't leave me," I screamed, the sound tearing from my throat raw and shrill. I started to run. My short legs pumped furiously, slapping against the scorching asphalt. The heat burned through the thin soles of my shoes. Exhaust fumes blasted into my face, filling my lungs with the acrid taste of abandonment. My eyes stung, tears mixing with the grit and dust. I ran until my lungs felt like they were on fire. "Wait, please wait!" I saw Victoria turn in the passenger seat. For a fleeting second, our eyes met. I saw her face, framed by a silk scarf she was adjusting to protect her hair from the wind. There was no regret in her eyes, no sorrow. She just looked annoyed that I was making a scene. She turned back around, facing the road, facing her future without me. In my desperate sprint, Mr. Paws slipped from my sweaty grip. I watched in slow motion as my beloved bear tumbled onto the road. The convertible's rear tire caught it. I heard a soft crunch as the heavy rubber ground the stuffed animal into the unforgiving pavement. I stumbled. My toe caught a crack in the road, and I went down hard. My knees slammed into the asphalt, skin shredding against the rough surface. Pain exploded up my legs, but it was nothing compared to the agony in my chest. I lay there in the dust, gasping for air, watching the two red taillights of the silver car get smaller and smaller. They blurred through my tears, shrinking until they disappeared around a bend in the road, taking my entire world with them. Silence descended, broken only by my own ragged sobbing. The sun beat down on my small, trembling body. I curled into a ball, hugging my knees, bleeding and broken, waiting for a car that would never come back. I lay there for what felt like hours, baking in the heat until a large shadow fell over me. It blocked out the blinding sun, offering a sudden, cool relief. I looked up through swollen, tear-filled eyes. Standing over me was a giant, or at least, he seemed like one to a 5-year-old. It was my grandfather, Henry. He stood tall, leaning on a polished oak cane. His face was a roadmap of wrinkles, etched deep by time and hardship. But his eyes? His eyes were burning with a fierce, cold fire. It wasn't anger at me. It was a protective fury directed at the road where the car had vanished. He didn't coo. He didn't bend down to scoop me up and whisper empty promises like, "It's okay, shh, don't cry." That wasn't Henry Barnett. Instead, he tapped my small shoulder firmly with the tip of his cane. Not hard, but demanding attention. "Stand up, Private," he commanded. His voice was deep and resonant, like a church bell. I blinked, confused, sniffing back snot and tears. "The enemy has retreated," he said, looking down at me sternly. "Crying won't bring deserters back. Tears are a waste of hydration." He extended a large, calloused hand. It looked rough, like old leather, but it was steady as a rock. "From this day forward," he declared, "I am your commanding officer, and we do not leave our wounded in the dirt." I stared at his hand. Then, slowly, painfully, I uncurled myself. I wiped the blood and gravel from my knees with the hem of my pink dress. I reached up and grasped his hand. It engulfed mine completely, warm and strong. If you've ever felt forced to grow up too fast because the people who were supposed to protect you failed, hit that like button. And tell me in the comments, who was the one person who finally stood by you when everyone else walked away? Type their name or just "my hero" to honor them. That was the moment I stopped crying. The abandoned 5-year-old girl died on that hot asphalt that day. In her place, a soldier began to take shape. The roar of the convertible engine faded from my memory, replaced by a new sound. A sound that would define the rest of my life. Knock, knock, knock. It was the sound of a cane hitting a bedroom door. Sharp, rhythm, disciplined. I blinked and the Santa Barbara sun vanished. I was back in the present, but the sound remained. Knock, knock, knock. It wasn't a memory anymore. It was 600 hours, and my training was far from over. Knock, knock, knock. The sound of Henry's cane against my door became the metronome of my new life. Life at the Barnett estate wasn't the Cinderella story people imagined. There were no maids bringing breakfast in bed, no sleeping in until noon. There was only Henry Barnett, a World War II veteran who ran his household like a platoon. "Euro 600 hours, Kaylee," his voice would boom through the door. "The sun waits for no one." I would roll out of bed, my feet hitting the cold floor before my eyes were fully open. My first task wasn't to check a phone or brush my hair. It was to make my bed, and not just pull the covers up. I had to make it to West Point standards, tight sheets, hospital corners so sharp you could cut your finger on them. If a quarter didn't bounce off the mattress, Henry would rip the sheets off, and I'd have to start over. Then came the run. 5 miles along the misty Malibu coastline, every single morning. At first, I hated it. My lungs burned like they were filled with acid. My legs felt like lead. I wanted to stop, to cry, to go back to being a normal kid who watched cartoons on Saturday mornings. But Henry ran beside me. Even in his 70s, his breathing was steady, rhythmic. "Pain is weakness leaving the body, Kaylee," he would say, not unkindly, but matter-of-factly. "Don't fear the pain. Use it. Turn it into fuel." Other grandfathers gave their granddaughters dolls or tea sets. Henry gave me running shoes and a stopwatch. He wasn't training me to be a princess. He was training me to conquer myself. Because, as he often said, if you can't command yourself, you can't command the world. By the time I was 10, while other kids were at summer camp making friendship bracelets, Henry took me to the massive central warehouse of Barnett Logistics. He tossed me a hard hat that was 2 sizes too big and a clipboard thick with inventory lists. The warehouse was a beast of steel and concrete, smelling of diesel and cardboard. "Power isn't sitting in an air-conditioned office pointing fingers," he told me, his voice echoing in the vast space. He walked me over to a forklift. "Power is knowing how every single bolt in your empire works. If you don't know the job of a soldier, you never deserve to be a general." That summer, I learned to drive a forklift before I learned to ride a bike. I spent my days checking crates, sweating alongside men with names like Big Mike and Sal. At lunch, we sat on stacks of pallets, eating bologna sandwiches on white bread that stuck to the roof of your mouth. They treated me with respect. Not because I was a Barnett, but because I worked. Henry taught me that dignity isn't found in clean clothes or a prestigious last name. It's found in grease-stained hands and an honest day's work. But the hardest lessons weren't physical. They were emotional. One evening, when I was around 12, Henry and I were eating dinner in the dining room. It was a quiet affair, just the clinking of silverware against china. The TV was on low in the corner, tuned to the news. Suddenly, the screen flashed to the red carpet of the Emmy Awards. My breath hitched. There they were, Charles and Victoria. They looked magnificent, glittering under the flashbulbs. Victoria was wearing a silver gown that hugged every curve, and Charles looked dashing in a tuxedo. But they weren't alone. In Victoria's arms was a fluffy white poodle. A reporter thrust a microphone into her face. "You look radiant, Victoria. Tell us, who do you love most in the world right now?" Victoria beamed, lifting the dog to her face. She kissed it right on its wet nose. "Oh, this is Coco. She's my everything. She's the most obedient, perfect little daughter I could ask for." Clang. My spoon dropped from my hand, hitting the soup bowl with a sharp, jarring noise. Little daughter. She used that word for a dog she had probably bought last week. She cooed at it with a warmth she had never shown me. They hadn't called me on my birthday in 5 years. They hadn't sent a card. But there they were, on national television, replacing me with a poodle named Coco. The silence in the dining room became suffocating. I stared at my soup, fighting the tears that threatened to spill. I wouldn't cry. Private Kaylee doesn't cry. Without a word, Henry picked up the remote and clicked the TV off. The screen went black, erasing their smiling, lying faces. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He didn't say, "They love you in their own way." He respected me too much to lie. Instead, he simply reached over with the serving spoon and put an extra helping of mashed potatoes on my plate. It was a small gesture, silent and sturdy. It was his way of saying, "I am here, I am real." They are ghosts, but the wound festered. By 16, I had grown quiet, sullen. I was angry at the world, angry at the unfairness of it all. I wanted to rebel, to scream. One night, sensing the storm brewing inside me, Henry called me into his study. The room smelled of old paper and pipe tobacco. He walked over to the wall, safe behind his desk, and spun the dial. He pulled out 2 things, a tattered, leather-bound journal and a paperback book titled Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. "I can't live forever to protect you, Kaylee," he said, his voice grave. He looked older that night, the lines on his face deeper. "Your parents live on lies. You must live on truth." He handed me the books. The journal felt heavy, like it held secrets. "This journal is for you to record the truth. Write down what happens. Documentation is your armor," he said. Then he tapped the cover of Meditations. "And this is to forge your mind into steel. This is Stoicism. It teaches us that we cannot control what happens to us, like who our parents are, but we can control how we respond." He placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. His grip was rough, calloused, but incredibly warm. "Remember this, Kaylee. Discipline is freedom. Only when you control yourself can no one else hurt you. Not Charles, not Victoria, no one." I looked at the books in my hands. I looked at the old man who had saved me from the side of the road. I realized then that he wasn't being hard on me because he didn't love me. He was hardening me because he knew the world was soft, and softness gets crushed. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't just be Henry's granddaughter, I would be a warrior. I opened the journal. On the first page, I didn't write "Dear Diary." I wrote a plan. Goal: United States Marine Corps. I closed the book with a snap. It wasn't just a journal anymore, it was my first weapon. And I was going to need it, because the war with the Barnetts wasn't over. It was just beginning. Helmand Province, Afghanistan. The heat was different here. It wasn't just hot, it was aggressive. It was 113 degrees Fahrenheit, a suffocating, dusty heat that felt eerily similar to that day in Santa Barbara 20 years ago. But this time, I wasn't a helpless child. I was Captain Kaylee Barnett, commanding officer of a Marine infantry company. And this time, I wasn't alone. We were on a routine patrol when hell opened up. Boom! An IED exploded 50 yards to my left, the shockwave punching the air out of my lungs. Before I could even shout a command, the distinctive crack hiss of AK-47 fire erupted from the ridgeline. Ambush! Contact left! Contact left! The world dissolved into chaos. Dust, screams, and the deafening roar of machine gun fire. A mortar round landed close, too close. The blast threw me backward, slamming me hard against a jagged rock wall. My ears rang with a high-pitched whine. Warm blood trickled down from a cut above my eye, blinding me. For a split second, lying there in the dirt, dazed and disoriented, I thought about dying. I didn't think about Charles or Victoria. I didn't see my life flash before my eyes. I just felt a pang of regret that I might die without saying thank you to Henry. Then, a hand grabbed the drag handle of my flak jacket. "Get up, Captain. Don't you die on me." It was Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, a big, burly Mexican-American from Texas who cursed like a sailor but had a heart of solid gold. He hauled me up with one hand while firing his M4 with the other. Bullets kicked up dirt around his boots, but he didn't flinch. He positioned his own body between me and the enemy fire, using himself as a human shield. "Move, Captain! Move!" he roared. "I still owe you $20 from that poker game. You can't die until I pay up." He dragged me behind the cover of an MR-app vehicle. As I caught my breath, wiping blood and dust from my eyes, I looked at him. He was sweating, terrified, but he was there. He had risked his life, his actual life, to save mine. That was the first time I truly understood what it meant to be protected. Not by money, not by influence, but by blood and loyalty. That night, back at the forward operating base, we celebrated Thanksgiving. There was no roast turkey with stuffing, no crystal glasses of red wine like the lavish parties my parents threw in Malibu. Dinner was MREs, meals ready to eat. I had the spaghetti with meat sauce, which tasted like cold, metallic paste. We sat around a small fire made from shipping pallets, the flickering light dancing on tired, dirty faces. Rodriguez broke a stale chocolate bar into pieces and passed them around like it was communion bread. The men started talking about home. They pulled out crumpled photos of wives, girlfriends, babies they hadn't met yet. "Hey, Captain," a young private named Miller asked, his mouth full of crackers. "Your parents send you anything? My mom sent 3 boxes of jerky." The circle went quiet. They knew I came from money. They assumed I got care packages filled with caviar. I reached into my rucksack and pulled out the only thing I'd received from the States. It was a tattered copy of Vanity Fair magazine I had found in the mailroom dump pile. I held it up. On the cover, Charles and Victoria were toasting with champagne flutes on a yacht in Cannes. The headline read, "The Barnetts, Living the Golden Life." "They sent me their silence," I said with a dry, humorless laugh. I tossed the magazine into the fire. The flames licked at the glossy paper, curling the edges of their perfect, fake smiles. We watched as Charles and Victoria turned into ash. Rodriguez watched me, his eyes dark and serious. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a Ziploc bag containing 3 crushed, homemade cookies. "My mom made these," he said, shoving the bag into my hand. "She said to share 'em with my tough-ass boss lady. Eat up, Captain. This is what a real care package tastes like." I took a bite. It was dry and crumbly, but it tasted like heaven. It tasted like a mother's love, something I had never actually tasted before. Later, under the glow of a red lens flashlight, I read the only letter that mattered. It was from Henry. His handwriting was shaky now, the strokes uneven, betraying his failing health. To Kaylee, my warrior. The vultures are circling back home. Your parents have already started asking the lawyers about the will. They think I'm too weak to notice. But don't worry, I'm still sitting on the grenade pin. You just focus on surviving and coming home. Remember, semper fi. Always faithful to yourself. Love, Grandpa. I read it twice, letting the words sink in. Tears pricked my eyes, blurring the ink. He was fighting a war on the home front, alone against their greed while I fought the Taliban. Captain? I looked up. Rodriguez was standing there, keeping watch. I don't know who your folks are, he said quietly, looking out into the dark desert. And I don't care how much money they have. Out here, you're our sister. You're one of us. If anything happens, I'll carry you home. The blood we spill on this dirt is all the same color. That's real bloodline. I stood up and gripped his shoulder. I know, Rodriguez, I whispered. I know. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like an orphan. I wasn't the abandoned girl on the side of the road anymore. I was a Marine. I was part of a tribe that would die for me. And I swore to myself, right then and there, that I would protect them with everything I had. But the peace of that night was fragile. Just as I was folding Henry's letter back into my pocket, the satellite phone in the command tent began to ring. It was a sharp, jarring sound that cut through the silence of the desert night. I stared at it. A cold knot formed in my stomach, heavier than any combat gear. I knew. Before I even picked it up, I knew. The war at home had just claimed its first casualty. The satellite phone call was brief. He's gone, Captain. Just like that, the only anchor I had in this world was cut loose. I caught the first transport out of Kandahar, flying 20 hours straight to Los Angeles. I didn't even change out of my desert camis until I hit the tarmac. I drove straight to the Barnett estate, my heart heavy with grief, expecting a somber house of mourning. What I walked into was a circus. The driveway was jammed with production trucks. Cables snaked across the manicured lawn like black vipers. A craft services tent was set up near the fountain, serving iced lattes to a crew of 30 people. This wasn't a wake. It was a season finale. I stormed into the grand foyer, still wearing my travel dust. The casket, my grandfather's casket, was set up in the center of the room. But it wasn't surrounded by flowers and silence. It was surrounded by LED lighting rigs and boom mics. Victoria was standing over the open casket, not praying, but yelling at a makeup artist. "Where is the blush?" she screamed, her voice shrill. "Look at him. He looks like a ghost. He needs more color on his cheeks. We are shooting in 4K, people. If he looks dead, I look bad." My blood turned to ice. She was treating Henry Barnett, a decorated war hero, and the man who built an empire, like a prop. I dropped my sea bag and marched forward. "Get your hands off him!" The room went silent. I shoved the makeup artist aside, placing my body between them and the casket. I glared at my mother. "What the hell are you doing? He just died, Victoria. Have some respect." She didn't even flinch. She looked me up and down with disdain, adjusting her black veil for maximum dramatic effect. "He's dead, Kaylee," she said coldly. "He doesn't care about blush, but I have a show to produce. Our ratings are in the toilet. We need a tearful funeral episode to get renewed for season 6. Now move." Before I could respond, Charles breezed into the room. He was holding a stack of papers, a script. "Kaylee, you're here. Perfect timing," he said, not offering a hug or a condolence. He looked me over critically. "Go get changed. Wardrobe has a black off-the-shoulder dress for you. We need you to collapse by the casket in scene 4. The director wants raw emotion." He tried to shove the script into my hand. I looked at the pages. Scene 4, Prodigal Daughter Returns. Callie weeps uncontrollably. I ripped the script in half. Then I ripped it again. I threw the confetti-like pieces in his face. "I am not an actor in your twisted reality show," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "I will wear my dress blues. I will stand guard for my grandfather. And if I see a single camera lens point at this casket, I will smash it." Charles's face turned a deep, ugly shade of purple. The veins in his neck bulged. "You ungrateful little brat," he hissed, leaning in close so the crew wouldn't hear. "You want to ruin our comeback? We need this money. You selfish bastard." Bastard. He said it right in front of his dead father. He called me a bastard in the presence of the man who raised me. The funeral service itself was a blur of tension. I stood at attention by the casket in my dress blues, a silent sentinel, while Charles and Victoria performed their grief for the cameras I'd forced to the back of the room. After the burial, we gathered in Henry's private study for the reading of the will. Mr. Samuel Briggs, Henry's attorney and oldest friend, sat behind the desk. Charles and Victoria were relaxed now. They sat on the leather sofa, sipping expensive red wine, swirling the glasses like they were celebrating a lottery win. They looked smug. They thought this was a formality. Mr. Briggs opened the sealed envelope. He adjusted his glasses and looked at my parents with utter contempt. I, Henry Barnett, Briggs read, his voice steady, being of sound mind and body, hereby declare, Charles and Victoria. You received your inheritance 27 years ago, on the day you left your daughter at my gate. Charles stopped swirling his wine. Victoria froze. Briggs continued reading Henry's words. You chose fame over family. You chose vanity over duty. Therefore, I leave 0% of my assets to you. I leave the entirety of my estate, my stocks, and Barnett Logistics, valued at $1.6 billion, to the only person who earned it, Captain Kaylee Barnett. The silence in the room was absolute. It was a vacuum. Then, smash. Victoria's wineglass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the hardwood floor, splashing red liquid like blood across the Persian rug. What? She shrieked. It wasn't a human sound. It was the cry of a banshee. She lunged at me. You bitch! You thief! Her fingernails sharpened like talons aimed for my face. What did you do to him? You forced him to sign this, didn't you? You used your military threats on a senile old man. I didn't flinch. I didn't need to. Charles grabbed her arm, holding her back, but his eyes were terrifying. They were filled with a cold, calculating hatred I had never seen before. You think you can steal $1.6 billion from us? Charles snarled, his voice trembling with rage. I will sue you into oblivion. I will destroy you. He stepped closer, invading my personal space. I will go to every news station, he threatened, spitting the words at me. I will tell the world you are a mentally unstable soldier with PTSD. I will say you manipulated a dying man. I will strip you of your money, your honor, and that pathetic rank you're so proud of. I stood my ground. I adjusted the medals on my chest, medals I had bled for. I looked him dead in the eye. Go ahead and try, I said calmly. I've been trained to handle terrorists, and you two just made the list. Charles sneered. You have no idea what we're capable of, Kaylee. The world loves a tragedy, and we're going to write one with your name on it. He was right about one thing. He was going to write a tragedy. But he underestimated who held the pen. Because as I walked out of that study, leaving them amidst the shattered glass and spilled wine, I knew the real war had just begun. And unlike them, I didn't fight for ratings. I fought to win. I woke up the next morning not to sunlight, but to the glow of the 60-inch TV screen in the living room. The world I knew had collapsed overnight. On the screen, the bright red logo of TMZ flashed aggressively. The chyron scrolling across the bottom screamed in all caps, exclusive, unhinged, Marine captain manipulates dying billionaire for inheritance. My stomach dropped. They were playing a video loop from the funeral, but it was edited, heavily edited. They cut out the part where Victoria was screaming about makeup. They cut out Charles handing me a script. All they showed was me shoving the makeup artist and glaring at my mother with intense, burning rage. They added dramatic, ominous sound effects, a low bass thrum, to make me look menacing. Look at those eyes, the TMZ host said, shaking his head. That's pure aggression. Sources say Captain Kaylee Barnett has a history of violent outbursts. Is this a case of PTSD gone wrong? I switched the channel. Good morning, America. There they were, Charles and Victoria sitting on a plush beige sofa, holding hands. Victoria was dabbing her eyes with a tissue, looking small and fragile. We're terrified of her, Charles said, his voice trembling just enough to be convincing. She sleeps with a knife under her pillow. She's obsessed with control. We tried to save my father, but she isolated him. We just wanted to get him help, but she threatened us. We love her, Victoria added, sniffing. We just want her to get the mental health treatment she desperately needs, but she's dangerous. Lies, all lies. But they were beautiful, polished lies delivered by professional actors. And the public was eating it up. My phone started vibrating on the coffee table. It wasn't messages of support. Buzz. An email from the Veterans Charity Foundation where I served as an ambassador. Subject: immediate suspension of partnership. Dear Ms. Barnett, in light of the serious allegations surfacing in the media, we must immediately suspend your role to protect our organization's reputation. Buzz. A call from my commanding officer at Camp Pendleton. Captain Barnett, Colonel Miller's voice was stiff, formal. Headquarters has seen the news. Given the gravity of the accusations regarding elder abuse and financial coercion, you are being placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. Surrender your sidearm and ID card to the MP station by 1200 hours. Sir, you can't be serious, I pleaded, my voice cracking. This is a smear campaign. My parents are actors. The optics are bad, Captain, he cut me off. Until this is cleared up, you are suspended. Do not contact your unit. The line went dead. Suspended. Stripped of my command. Stripped of my purpose. In the span of 2 hours, Charles and Victoria had taken away the only thing that truly mattered to me, my honor. I sat alone in the vast, empty living room of Henry's estate. I was surrounded by luxury, but I had never felt more isolated. I was a pariah. Then, my phone rang again. Caller ID, Victoria. I stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. I didn't say a word. Hello, darling. Victoria's voice purred through the speaker. The sobbing, fragile victim from TV was gone. This was the real Victoria, cold, calculating, and triumphant. See, she said lightly. I told you. No one believes a stubborn grunt over America's sweethearts. The public loves a villain, Kaylee. And right now, you're the villain. What do you want? I ground out. It's simple, she said. Sign a settlement agreement. We split the inheritance 50-50. You give us $800 million and we'll go back on TV. We'll tell everyone it was a misunderstanding. We'll say you're seeking treatment and responding well. We'll give you your life back. She paused, letting the offer hang in the air like poison. Or, she continued, her voice dropping to a whisper, you can keep fighting. And we will find a witness from your platoon who will swear you mistreated prisoners in Afghanistan. We have the budget for it. You'll be court-martialed before the week is out. She was blackmailing me. She was holding my entire career, my reputation, my very identity hostage for a payday. Think about it, sweetie. You have 24 hours. Click. I looked at the phone in my hand. Then I looked at the coffee table. Sitting there, collecting dust, was my bronze star medal in its velvet case. I had earned that crawling through mud and blood to pull a wounded corporal out of a firefight. Now, in the eyes of the world, it was just a prop for a psycho. A surge of white-hot rage flooded my veins. It wasn't the helpless anger of a child anymore. It was the focused fury of a soldier who had been backed into a corner. Never, I growled to the empty room. I stood up and hurled my phone against the wall. It shattered on impact, plastic and glass spraying across the floor. I would rather lose every dime. I would rather be court-martialed than give those terrorists a single cent of Henry's legacy. I paced the room, my mind racing. They had the media. They had the narrative. They had the acting skills. What did I have? I looked up at the oil painting of Henry hanging above the fireplace. It was painted when he was younger, standing next to his first delivery truck. His eyes seemed to follow me, stern and expectant. When you're surrounded, I could almost hear his voice. Check your reserve ammo. I stopped. The reserve ammo. I remembered something Henry had told me years ago, back when he first showed me the warehouse. Always have a backup plan, Kaylee, and keep it where the enemy won't look. He always hated that painting. He said it was too pretentious. So why was it the centerpiece of his study? I walked over to the fireplace. I reached up and gripped the heavy gold frame of the painting. It was heavy, but adrenaline gave me strength. I pulled. With a groan of metal hinges, the painting swung outward. It wasn't just a painting. It was a door. Revealed behind it, set deep into the stone of the chimney, was a steel safe. an old, heavy-duty model that looked like it belonged in a bank vault from the 1950s. My heart hammered in my chest. This was it. This was the black box of truth. If you believe that the truth is the only weapon that matters when the whole world turns against you, smash that like button right now. And comment truth below if you're ready to see Kali fight back. I reached for the dial. My fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from anticipation. Click, click, click. My fingers rested on the cool steel dial of the wall safe, hidden deep behind the heavy frame of Picasso's The Old Guitarist. The painting, a haunting image of a bent, lonely old man, had always been Henry's favorite. Now I knew why. It wasn't just art, it was a mirror. It was him, guarding his secrets in solitude. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my shaking hands. The combination. Henry was a man of patterns, but he was also paranoid about security. It wouldn't be his birthday. It wouldn't be the day he founded Barnett Logistics. Those were public record. He would choose something sacred, something only a Marine would know by heart. I spun the dial clockwise. 10. Counterclockwise. 11. Clockwise again. 75. November 10th, 1775. The birthday of the United States Marine Corps. Click. The sound was sharp and satisfying, like the racking of a bolt on a rifle. The heavy steel doors swung open on silent hinges. Inside, there were no stacks of gold bars, no velvet bags of diamonds. Instead, the safe was packed tight with manila folders, a stack of USB drives labeled by year. And resting right on top, the old leather-bound journal he had given me when I was 16. I reached in and pulled out the first folder. It was labeled Correspondence, Charles and Victoria. I opened it and my heart broke. It was filled with letters, dozens of them. Letters written in Henry's neat, cursive handwriting, addressed to my parents. Most of them had never been mailed. Some had been returned to sender, unopened. I picked up one dated when I was 7 years old. Dear Charles, Kaylee fell off her bike today. She needed 3 stitches on her knee. She cried for an hour, asking for her mother. I held her, but I'm just an old man. She needs you. Please, I beg you, come visit her. Just for an afternoon. I will pay for your first-class tickets. I will pay for your hotel. Just show up. Stapled to the back of the letter was a printout of an email response from Victoria's assistant. From Assistant to Ms. Barnett. To Henry Barnett. Subject: Visit Mr. Barnett. Victoria is currently shooting a fragrance campaign in Paris and cannot be disturbed with domestic issues. Please do not send further requests. Her schedule is full until next spring. I felt a hot tear roll down my cheek and splash onto the paper, blurring the word Paris. He had begged. He had practically knelt before them, offering money just to buy me an hour of their time. And they had rejected me via an assistant. I put the folder down, my hands trembling with a mix of sorrow and rage. I picked up the journal. This was the black box. I opened it to a random page from 5 years ago. October 14th. Victoria called today. She didn't ask how I was feeling after my surgery. She didn't ask about Kaylee's deployment. She asked for $500,000. She said she needed a refresh on her nose because the tabloids said she looked tired. I told her no. She screamed at me for 20 minutes, calling me a useless miser. She said she hoped I died soon so she could finally live properly. I turned the page. December 24th, Christmas Eve. Charles showed up drunk. He smashed the vase in the hallway because I refused to invest in his new film project. He got in my face, smelling of whiskey and cheap perfume. He poked me in the chest and said, "You senile old bat, we're going to put you in a home. We'll declare you incompetent and take control. Just, you wait." I recorded the conversation on the security system. File saved, xmaz, threat.mp4. I looked at the stack of USB drives in the safe. xmaz, the threat.mp4. It was there, every insult, every threat, every demand for money. He hadn't just endured it, he had documented it. He had been building a case against his own son and daughter-in-law for decades. He knew this day would come. He knew they would try to destroy me to get to his money. I flipped to the very last entry. The date was just 3 days before he died. The handwriting was shaky, the pen strokes faint, as if he was struggling to hold the pen. Kaylee, if you are reading this, it means the wolves have finally shown their teeth. They will try to say I was crazy. They will try to say you manipulated me. Do not be afraid. I did not leave you a burden, my dear. I left you a sword. Everything is here, the recordings, the emails, the medical records proving my sanity. Use this truth to cut the chains they have wrapped around us. I am proud of you. You are the daughter I never had. Go give them hell. Semper Fi, your tin soldier. I closed the journal. The leather cover felt warm under my fingertips. The fear that had been gripping my chest for the last 24 hours evaporated. The confusion vanished. The hurt faded into the background. In their place, a cold, hard resolve settled over me. It was the same feeling I had before a mission. The calm before the trigger pull. I wasn't a victim of a smear campaign anymore. I wasn't the unhinged girl they painted on TV. I was Captain Callie Barnett, and I was now fully armed. I wiped the tears from my face. I stood up straight. I looked at the painting of the old man one last time. Roger that, Grandpa, I whispered. Message received. I packed the journals, the files, and the drives into my tactical bag. I zipped it shut with a definitive zip. Tomorrow, back in that courtroom, it wouldn't be my trial. It would be an execution, and I was the one holding the rifle. My eyes narrowed, focusing on the invisible target. I had the plan. I had the ammo, and I was ready to kill the enemy's narrative once and for all. Semper Fi. The courtroom buzzed with a low, anxious energy as proceedings resumed. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the impending strike. I sat at the defense table, my hand resting on the heavy tactical bag. Sterling, the opposing lawyer, was already standing, strutting like a peacock. Your Honor, he drawled, gesturing toward me with feigned pity. It is clear that Captain Barnett is not in a state of mind to manage her own affairs. We are requesting an immediate psychiatric evaluation and temporary conservatorship to be granted to her parents, Charles and Victoria Barnett. Charles nodded solemnly from the plaintiff's table. Victoria dabbed her eyes with a fresh handkerchief. They thought they had won. They thought this was the closing scene. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor, silencing the room. Objection, I said, my voice clear and steady. I am firing my counsel. I wish to represent myself. Proceed. A gasp rippled through the gallery. Sterling froze mid-gesture. Even Judge Nolan looked surprised, peering over his spectacles. Captain Barnett, the judge warned, that is highly irregular and risky. Are you sure? I have never been more sure of anything in my life, sir. I walked to the center of the room. I didn't carry legal briefs or case law. I carried the tattered, leather-bound journal and a single USB drive. I placed the journal on the witness stand with a heavy thud. They claim I manipulated my grandfather, I said, turning to face the jury, then my parents. They claim I used undue influence to force a dying man to sign a will. But the truth is, Henry Barnett was manipulated his entire life, by the greed of his own flesh and blood. Victoria's face went pale. Charles stopped nodding. I would like to submit Exhibit A, I announced, holding up the USB drive. Surveillance footage from inside the Barnett estate, dated 1 month ago. The large monitors mounted on the courtroom walls flickered to life. The grain was sharp, the audio crystal clear. It showed the living room of the estate. Henry was sitting in his wheelchair, looking frail and small. Charles was standing over him, slamming his fist onto the coffee table. Sign the damn check, old man. Charles's voice on the video boomed through the courtroom speakers. I need $2 million by Friday or the studio pulls the plug. If you don't sign, I swear to God, when you die, we won't even bury you. We'll let the county dispose of you like trash. The courtroom erupted in gasps. The jurors' eyes went wide, but the video wasn't over. On screen, Victoria entered the frame. She wasn't comforting Henry. She was holding a bottle of pills, his heart medication, just out of his reach. You want your pills, Henry? Victoria sneered on the screen. Then give me the combination to the wall safe. Give it to me, or you can ride out this angina attack on your own. Oh my God, a woman in the jury whispered audibly. The reporters in the back row, the same ones who had called me unhinged just hours ago, were now frantically typing, their jaws on the floor. The image of the grieving, devoted children shattered into a million pieces. Turn it off! Victoria shrieked from the plaintiff's table. She couldn't take it. The mask slipped completely. She leaped from her chair, her face twisted into a mask of pure, ugly rage. That's fake! She screamed, lunging toward the monitor controls. She used AI. It's a deepfake. She's a witch, a demon. She ran toward me, her hands curled into claws, aiming for my face. You ungrateful little bitch! I gave you life! She was hysterical, cursing in words that would make a sailor blush. In her frenzy, her expensive, carefully pinned wig snagged on the edge of the witness stand and tore loose, falling to the floor. Underneath, her natural hair was thin and gray, a stark contrast to the glamorous persona she projected. Order! Order in this court! Judge Nolan shouted, banging his gavel. Two bailiffs tackled Victoria before she could reach me. They pinned her to the ground as she kicked and screamed, foaming at the mouth like a rabid animal. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I stood at attention, watching her with a profound, detached pity. The world finally saw her. Not a star, but a monster fueled by greed. Charles sat frozen in his chair, shrinking into his Armani suit, realizing his life was over. Judge Nolan banged his gavel until the room fell into a stunned silence. The bailiffs dragged a sobbing Victoria back to her seat. The judge looked at me. His eyes, usually hard and unreadable, softened. He looked at the journal I'd placed on the stand. Then he looked at the pathetic figures of Charles and Victoria. I served in Vietnam in 1968, Judge Nolan said, his voice low but carrying to every corner of the room. I was a private in the Marine Corps. My platoon sergeant was a man named Henry Barnett. A shockwave went through the room. I stiffened. I didn't know. I knew Henry, the judge continued, his voice thick with emotion. He was the toughest, most honorable man I ever met. He pulled me out of a rice paddy when I took a bullet to the leg. The idea that anyone, especially you, Captain, could manipulate him is not just legally absurd, it is personally offensive. He picked up the journal and held it aloft like a holy book. This evidence speaks for itself. It paints a clear picture of abuse, neglect, and extortion, but not by the defendant. He looked down at Charles and Victoria with a glare that could peel paint. As the Bible says in Psalm 27:10, "Though my father and mother forsake me, the Lord will receive me." It seems Henry received his granddaughter when you forsook her. He slammed the gavel down. The petition for conservatorship is denied with prejudice. The will stands. Captain Callie Barnett is the sole and rightful heir to the Barnett estate. He paused, then added the final blow. Furthermore, based on the video evidence presented, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for immediate investigation into charges of elder abuse, extortion, and attempted fraud against Charles and Victoria Barnett. Bailiffs, take them into custody. Bang! The sound of the gavel hitting the wood block was the loudest, sweetest sound I had ever heard. It echoed in the courtroom, a thunderclap of finality. The bailiffs moved in, handcuffs clicking onto Charles's wrists. Victoria wailed as she was hauled away. I stood alone in the center of the storm, the crazy vet who had just brought down two Hollywood giants. I looked up at Judge Nolan, and for a brief second, he gave me a sharp nod. A salute from one Marine to another. Justice had been served. Cold, hard, and absolute. I stepped out of the courthouse doors and was immediately blinded. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across Los Angeles, but the flashbulbs of 100 cameras turned the dusk into a strobe-lit frenzy. The same reporters who had crucified me yesterday were now shouting my name with reverence. Captain Barnett, how does it feel to be vindicated? Are you going to countersue your parents? Captain, just one smile for the camera. I stopped at the top of the stairs. I adjusted my cover, my Marine Corps cap, making sure it sat perfectly level. I looked out at the sea of microphones, but I didn't see them. I looked through them. I leaned into the nearest mic and spoke 5 words. Mission accomplished, truth secured, dismissed. I didn't smile. I didn't pump my fist in victory. I walked down the steps with the same measured pace I'd walked in with, ignoring the chaotic shouting. I climbed into the back of the waiting black town car, the heavy door thumping shut and sealing out the noise. Silence enveloped me. Most people think victory tastes like champagne. It doesn't. It tastes like sweat, adrenaline crash, and salt. My phone buzzed in my lap. I looked down. Charles. For a moment, I considered not answering, but I knew this was the final act. I swiped right. Hello, I said. My voice was flat, devoid of emotion. Kaylee. Charles's voice was unrecognizable. Gone was the polished baritone of the actor. Gone was the arrogant sneer of the plaintiff. All that was left was the whimpering of a broken man. Kaylee. Honey. I'm so sorry. I waited. Your mother and I, we weren't thinking straight, he stammered, his breath hitching. We were desperate. We owe some very bad people a lot of money. Loan sharks, Kaylee. If we don't pay by Friday, they'll hurt us. The reality show is canceled. We have nothing. He paused, and I could hear him weeping. Could you just help us out? Just a few million? We're your parents. We're family. My grip on the phone tightened. He wasn't apologizing because he realized he had hurt me. He wasn't sorry for calling me a bastard or trying to destroy my career. He was sorry because he lost. He was sorry because he was broke and scared. Even now, in his darkest hour, I was just an ATM to him. A tiny flickering flame of hope, the childish hope that maybe, just maybe, he would say, I love you. Finally sputtered and died. My heart turned to ice, not from cruelty, but from preservation. Listen to me, Mr. Charles, I said. I didn't call him Dad. I would never call him that again. I will not give you a single dime of Henry's money, not 1 cent. Kaylee, please, he begged. However, I continued, cutting him off, because I am a Marine, and we do not leave even the enemy to die in the street without mercy, I have arranged one thing. I will pay for 6 months of inpatient treatment for both you and Victoria at the Cliffside Rehab Center. It's paid in full. You can get clean. You can get therapy. But the loan sharks, that is your war, not mine, I said coldly. And hear this clearly. After this call, you are never to contact me again. If you come near the estate, if you come near me, or if you ever speak Henry Barnett's name in public again, I won't call a lawyer. I will handle it using the rules of engagement I learned in Helmand. Do you copy? There was a long silence on the other end. Then, a defeated whisper. I copy. I ended the call. Then I blocked the number. A physical sensation washed over me. A lightness, as if I had been carrying a 100-pound rucksack for 32 years and had finally dropped it. The invisible chain that bound me to their toxicity snapped. I leaned back into the leather seat. I was alone. Truly, completely alone. Where to, Captain? The driver asked, glancing in the rearview mirror. I looked out the window at the passing palm trees. I was a billionaire. I could go to Spago. I could buy a jet. I could go anywhere. Pull over there, I said, pointing to a red and yellow sign up ahead. In and Out Burger. 10 minutes later, I was sitting in the back of a luxury limousine, parked overlooking the Pacific Ocean. On my lap was a cardboard tray holding a double-double, animal style, and a side of fries. The smell of grilled onions and melted cheese filled the car. It was the smell of California, of normal life, of things that were simple and real. I took a bite. It was greasy and delicious. Suddenly, a sob ripped through my chest. It came out of nowhere, violent and shaking. I put the burger down and covered my face with my hands. I cried. I cried for the 5-year-old girl left on the curb. I cried for the teenager who ate dinner in silence. I cried for Henry. And yes, I cried for the parents I never had. Tears dripped down my cheeks and landed on the wrapper of the cheap burger. I realized then that I was an orphan. They were alive, but I was an orphan. But as the tears subsided, a strange peace settled in. It was better this way. It was better to be an orphan in the truth than to have a family in a lie. I wiped my face with a paper napkin. I picked up the burger and took another bite. The sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. The long night was over. My life, my real life, started now. 6 months later. The iron gates of the Barnett estate swung open, but this time they didn't creak ominously. And the grounds weren't silent anymore. The sprawling lawn, once perfectly manicured and lifeless, was now a glorious mess of activity. A group of kids, ranging from 5 to 15, were running through the sprinklers, their laughter echoing off the stone walls of the mansion. Near the rose garden, a circle of veterans, some in wheelchairs, some with prosthetic limbs, were sitting in the shade, sharing stories and coffee. I stood on the balcony, watching them. I didn't use the $1.6 billion to buy a yacht. I didn't buy a private island. I didn't even buy a new car. I turned the estate into Camp Henry. It was a sanctuary. Half of it was a permanent home for foster kids who had aged out of the system or been rejected by their families. The other half was a reintegration center for homeless veterans struggling with PTSD. It was my way of ensuring that no child would ever have to run after a car in desperate tears again, and no soldier would ever have to feel like they were fighting their battles alone. "Hey, watch out for the hydrangeas," I called down with a smile, watching a little boy named Leo chase a golden retriever puppy through the bushes. Leo had arrived last week, clutching a torn backpack and looking at the world with the same terrified eyes I used to have. Now he was laughing. A dusty, beat-up Ford F-150 truck rumbled up the driveway, its engine coughing. It parked near the fountain. The driver's door opened and a large man stepped out. He walked with a slight limp, favoring his left leg, a souvenir from an IED in Helmand. He shielded his eyes from the sun and looked up at the balcony. "Hola, Captain," he shouted, his voice booming. "I heard a rumor you were looking for a head of security. Pays well, good dental plan?" My heart leaped. I ran down the stairs, skipping the last two, and sprinted across the grass. "Rodriguez!" I crashed into him, hugging him tight. He laughed, a deep warm sound, and hugged me back, smelling of diesel and road dust. "Welcome home, brother," I whispered. "Good to be here, sister," he said, pulling back to look at the kids playing. "You did good, Kaylee. The old man would be proud." "He would," I said, tears pricking my eyes. But they were happy tears. "Come on. Let me show you your quarters. You've got the guest house by the pool." That evening, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the Malibu sky in strokes of fiery orange and soft lavender, I walked down to the private beach. I wasn't wearing my dress blues. The heavy wool uniform, with its stiff collar and weight of responsibility, was hanging in the closet. Instead, I wore a simple white sundress that caught the ocean breeze. I was barefoot, the cool sand shifting between my toes. I sat on a piece of driftwood, listening to the rhythmic crash of the waves. In my lap was Henry's old leather journal. I opened it to the very last page. Below his final message to me, I took a pen and wrote my own entry. "Mission accomplished, Commander. The perimeter is secure, the troops are safe, and for the first time in 32 years, I have found peace." I closed the book and held it to my chest. I closed my eyes and listened. I didn't hear Charles's shouting. I didn't hear Victoria's fake weeping. I didn't hear the roar of the silver convertible leaving me behind. Those ghosts were gone, exorcised by the light of the truth. They were just faded characters in the movie of my life, extras who had been written out of the script. I looked out at the vast, endless ocean. The sun was gone now, but the lighthouse on the distant point had started its rotation. Flash, darkness, flash, darkness. A steady, unyielding beam cutting through the night. I realized then that family isn't about DNA. It isn't about sharing a last name or a bloodline. Family are the people who see your scars and choose to kiss them instead of making them deeper. Family are the people who stand beside you in the trench when the mortar rounds are falling. Family are the people who drive beat-up trucks across the country just to make sure you aren't alone. I am Callie Barnett. I was abandoned. I was betrayed. I was slandered. But I am still standing. I am a lighthouse now. And as long as I have breath in my lungs, I will keep my light burning for every lost ship trying to find its way home. I took a deep breath of the salty air, filling my lungs with freedom. Semper Fi, always faithful. Not to them, but to myself. If there is one thing I want you to take away from my journey, it is this. Your bloodline does not define your destiny. We are often raised to believe that we owe our family everything, even our dignity. But that is a dangerous lie. Real loyalty is earned through love, respect, and sacrifice, not demanded through guilt or DNA. You have the power to break the cycle of abuse. You have the absolute right to walk away from toxicity, no matter who it comes from. Remember, the strongest family isn't the one you inherit. It's the one you build with the people who truly show up for you when the storm hits. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to make the heartbreaking choice to cut ties with a toxic family member to save your own peace? Or maybe you have found a Rodriguez or a Henry in your own life, someone who became your true family, not by blood, but by choice. Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be the lighthouse that guides someone else home. And if you believe in justice and standing up for the truth, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let's build a community that fights for what's right. Semper Fi.